Okay, we'll call that 11. So let's get going. So I've been asked to just do a bit of a run through of our new Adroit Air system. It is currently available for Android only. We're busy with our iOS version, and that should be ready quite shortly. So let's get going with the presentation. Alrighty, so I'm just going to go through a high-level discussion of Adroit Air. Then I'll give you an overview of the setup, especially as it relates to your IT infrastructure. And then lastly, we'll go through a bit of a demonstration to show how to get it working and set up on your side. Let's just see that my PowerPoint is working. Okay. So, yeah, as I said, we'll go through the discussion. Let's first start by telling you what Adroit Air is all about. So it's basically a system that allows you to notify your users of alarms or events on site directly on their mobile phone. It consists of a smart UI data source along with a mobile app. The data source basically just subscribes to the defined agents in Adroit. When these agents get a change, we push notifications onto the Google notification fabric. Then anyone who's got an app instance registered will subscribe to these notifications on the cloud. So anytime we push notifications from the server, the notification fabric will deliver them to those interested parties. Adroit Air was developed to be a multi-user and multi-project solution. This means that while every project can have multiple users assigned, depending on your licensing, every user can also be subscribed to multiple projects. Now this is useful for cases where your project might span across multiple Adroit installations, or in the case where you're an SI and you support multiple clients and you might need to be kept in the loop of certain events from each site. At this point, we've allowed the system to deliver three different types of messages. First and foremost are alarms. Alarms are configured by pointing or linking an Adroit Air user to an alarm list. The user will then receive the top 10 active alarms on that alarm list or alarm agent by priority and time. You'll need to keep in mind that it's a snapshot of the alarms at a certain point in time, so it doesn't hold a history. Meaning that as your alarm list changes, if you end up with an empty alarm list, the user will also see that alarm list as being empty. We added text messages. Mainly this is for testing the system once you've got it all set up, but we've also exposed the text message functionality via the operator as a custom control that you can place on a form. This will allow your operators to send messages. Let's check those comments. To send messages to the maintenance teams or engineering teams when some situation arises. Lastly, we've also created process data message types. So these are configurable message types where you type up your own custom message. You can include up to 10 data element values, live data element values in those messages, and you can configure up to 10 of these messages. They'll then get sent on a configured agent change. It's basically a trigger. the idea is that you'd send these messages on like distinct events, let's say once every hour or once every shift change, or maybe when a batch runs to completion, that value changes, and then we send off the appropriate process data message. Now with both alarm messages and process data messages, we've deadbanded the messages by a minute, meaning you won't be able to spam your users. I mean, typically these types of messages should really be going at a slower rate than that anyway, but that's your maximum rate. So as far as the IT infrastructure goes, you basically just have your Smart UI server that needs to have access to the internet for this to work. We just communicate through your HTTP ports out onto the internet. It's what we've done to try and help the safety and security of the system is the Smart UI server is always the one initiating the communication to the internet. So we're not listening on an open port. We are sending out messages and receiving responses to those messages. Once the message is on the cloud, Google will deliver it directly to Android phones and via the Apple APNs network to the iOS phones when we get there. Alright, so that's the basic run through of what Air is and what it's about. I know some of you might have used it already. So this is just a short demonstration of how to go through getting people onto your system registered so you can start sending messages to those users. Okay, so like I said, I'm going to take us through the process of adding your Adroit Air data source and onboarding your first user. We'll start here in the designer. First adding the Adroit Air data source. We select Air from the list here. Then it prompts us for our username and password. If you haven't gotten Adroit Air credential yet, you can just register right here. Let's log in first. And go ahead and log in. Right, then it's going to ask us for a name for our project. This can be any free text. Typically would match the name of the project that you're busy with. I'll call mine webinar. Add. It'll give us some more version info and whatnot. It's not really important right now. I'll just say finish. So that's about it. We've added our Adroit Air data source. If you go and configure, you'll see that we've got our list of users that can receive messages from us is empty at the moment. If we take a further look at this dialog, it has the space for inviting new users, and it needs a user ID to continue. So that's where we'll go next. Let me just switch on my emulator here. So there's your Android phone with Adroit Air pre-installed. I'm going to open that up. Log in here. I'm going to use the same details. It's quite common to do this, especially first time round, because you want to be able to test the system end to end. So I'm going to add myself as a user. And just hide this. Type in my password. transition back and we can log in. So as this is my first time logging into Air with this user, you'll see I'm not part of a project yet, but it does tell me if I wanted to join a project, I must go to settings and send my project admin my ID, which is what we'll do now. That's the option we're looking for, send ID to project administrator. If I click on that, it's basically going to open my email app on my phone and pre-populate it with my user's Adroit Air registration ID. Typically you'd send this to your admin user. I'm not going to wait for the email to arrive, so I'll just copy it straight out of here. And let's go back to Adroit Air first. Then if we go back to the data source side, I'm going to paste that ID in here, send the invite to the user. See the fact that it's appeared on the pending users list means the invite was sent successfully. And you can also see on our emulator that the message arrived. The message is basically the project that the message was sent from, and a one-time PIN, which is used to authenticate the phone or the app instance to the data source. 88087, we type back in this side. And we can just select the user that the invite was sent to and validate that OTP. That means that the process was successful because now Steve is in my list of available users. If I go back in the app, you'll see that I'm now part of the webinar project. So the onboarding process is effectively completed. What we can do now, just to make sure everything is working 100%, is just from the data source side, send a little test message. Let's go to Steve. Send that, and then you'll see you received the message in short order. Okay, so that's a quick run through of the onboarding process with a little bit of a test in there as well. That was going to be the extent of my demonstration for now, but I think since we've still got time, I'll take you through a little demonstration of the other message types quickly. Let me just transition to my demonstration area and get my designer up here. Okay, so where we left off, once this loads, we've got our user added to our system. We sent the text message to make sure that he can receive messages, so we know the system's working end to end. Now we can start playing around and getting some real functionality out of the system. So the first and probably primary reason to use this is to send alarms out to users. Usually you'd get here, and this is the configuration you'd see. You'd have a list of all the available users down the left hand side. We've currently just got Steve. We've got our configuration here for alarms. You'll see we've got support for multiple agent servers, or Adroit data sources rather. And then it'll bring up the list of all the available alarm type agents, so alarm lists and alarm agents. I've set up a little alarm list agent that I'm routing my alarms to. This is probably a good example of how it will be set up. Sorry, I see you can't see the drop down there. It's basically just a list of your alarm list and alarm agents. I've made an alarm list agent called Air List admin, and I'm going to route all the alarms that I care about to that alarm list. Now you would make a different alarm list for every user or group of users that would get their own sort of list of alarms. You can also set the minimum priority that you want to get bothered for. We'll leave it on 0 to make sure we get all of them. And that's pretty much it for alarming. I've got a little demonstration form here, and I'll just push my value into an alarm state. So there we go, we get the alarm in the alarm viewer. This time it was quite quick with the alarm message coming through. It's on a cyclic 1 minute deadband, so depending on what time in that cycle you hit it, you'll get the message quicker than a minute, but the maximum wait time should be around a minute. In the app, you can go and click to see some more detail on the alarm that's come through. This is basically, if you set up your alarms with the appropriate information, then all that will come through in the app. Description, reported data, all that sort of stuff. If we clear this alarm, take it back to 500. Acknowledge it as well. And then somewhere after clearing it, it'll clear, and you'll see we don't have the alarm category anymore because there's no active alarms. Then if we take a look at the process data messages, you can go there. So we'll this is the space where you can configure up to 10 messages. We'll start by adding 1. Okay, and then edit it. We'll say the value of the tag is, and for those of you familiar with the tooltip behavior, this is the same interface that we use for that. We'll take our analog value, give it a fixed numeric format, and insert it at the cursor. Any process data message can be delivered to any of your configured users. We're just going to send it to Steve. Apply, and then the next important bit is the trigger that you use. For this demonstration, I'm going to send it on a digital value change, but this can get linked up to anything, any sort of logic you've got going in Adroit. Really, you can drive some expression to change a value based on any sort of combination of logic that you already have in your agent server. Okay, we'll save that, finish, just bring this up. So now anytime I toggle the digital, that may have been quick. There we go. Yeah, that first click was a bit soon. It'll send out the message with the value of the tag at that time. So I'm going to go and change this to 600, finish, and I'll toggle the digital again in the meantime, but it's not going to send the message immediately. It's going to wait for the minute from the previous message to elapse before it actually sends the message out. While we wait for that, I'll open up our config area again, see if there's anything that I've missed. We've got the ability to activate and deactivate users. That's basically a quick way, without erasing the configuration for a certain user, you can temporarily stop him from getting any messages. Let's say someone goes on leave or whatever, you can just deactivate their account for the time being. I see our next messages come through with the changed value of 600. It also has a detailed view, but it doesn't give you anything more than just the line item there. The messages can be, I think, up to 1,000 characters. It might be a little bit higher than that for the process data messages. so you can get quite a bit of information in there. Like I said, you can include up to 10 data element values per message, and then have up to 10 messages configured, which is, I mean, that's a total of quite a lot, looking at 100 data element values that you can push through to your users at the relevant time of that event occurring. And that's pretty much, I think, what we'll cover. Let me see if there's been any comments or questions. All looks quiet at this point. So like I said at the start, this is going to be available for Android and iOS. Currently our first version is just for Android. We're still in the process of getting our app published by Apple as well. And see, that was quick. Yeah, nothing new yet on the comments. I think if everybody's gotten a sort of grip on this, I think there are some detail that might be important in terms of how to actually construct your notification strategy, which I think will probably get to sort of a best practices point at some stage, and then we'll publish something again to show how to go around an actual implementation. It does work with maps. It's based on the same server, so you'll have all the functionality available in maps as well. Another important consideration that you'll probably run into at some point is on sites where you don't necessarily want to expose your servers directly to the internet. You can run another SmartUI server or map server in your DMZ and have your sort of access limited to let's call it an empty SmartUI server whose only job is to send out these messages. Let me switch to this quickly. So I think I'm going to call it there. Thanks for tuning in, guys. And we've got our contact information up on the website and stuff if you need have any specific questions or need some extra insight on this solution. And I think that's it. Thanks for watching.